Ah, yes, the age old question corruption or crimson? Today, I'm going to find out for sure which is objectively better. Subjectively, of course. Now, if you have no idea what I'm talking about, each Terraria world has either the corruption or the crimson as its evil biome. One purple, one red. When you create a world, you get to choose which one you'd rather suffer through. And the only way to decide the victor would obviously be to compare and contrast every single little minute detail. Let's go back for a moment to the beginning of time itself 2011. When Terraria was released, there was no crimson. Every world had the corruption, because the crimson was only added as an alternative evil in version 1.2 in 2013. Although this holds almost no value in the argument, being the original deserves a little credit, in the end, it really comes down to preference. First of all, the theme and design choices of each biome. The corruption is purple and is supposed to be rotten and impure, whereas the crimson is red and based simply on good old blood and guts. The crimson is definitely a little nastier when you get into the items and details, so I'll give the point to the corruption. These two biomes have the most impact in the early game, because you might have to walk through them to get to the jungle or another valuable biome. They're fairly balanced in this sense, though. The corruption is littered with deep holes that will kill you from fall damage, but it only has one enemy, the Eater of Souls, which are relatively easy to avoid. Whereas the crimson has easier terrain, but there are 3 different enemies, which are stronger and more difficult to avoid. They both get a point for this one. Once you get past that initial phase, it's time to fight the respective bosses of each biome. But first, they have to be summoned by breaking 3 Shadow Orbs or Crimson Hearts, which drop 1 of 5 items for each biome. They each can drop 1 weapon for melee, ranged, and magic, a light pet, or an accessory. The melee drop for the corruption is the Ball o' Hurt, a flail, and the crimson drop is the Rotted Fork, a spear. The range drops are the musket for the corruption and the Undertaker for the crimson, both are guns. The magic drop for the corruption is the Vile Thorn, basically a spear, and the Crimson Rod for the crimson, which summons a rain cloud to damage enemies. The light pet for the corruption is just a shadow orb, and the crimson pet is an actual heart. The accessories are the Band of Star Power for the corruption and the Panic Necklace for the crimson. Alright, that was a lot of just words, so I'll try to make this quick. The Ball of Hurt does more damage, and it's better since the flail buff in 1.4. I prefer the musket for higher damage, even though it's slower. The Vile Thorn's good, but the Crimson Rod is more interesting, and can be used at the same time as any other weapon. Shadow Orb is objectively a better light pet, because it goes through blocks, and also the Crimson Heart is disgusting, anyway, because it's literally a bouncing, bleeding heart. The Band of Star Power gives an extra 20 mana, and the Panic Necklace makes you faster when you take damage, making it more useful in general. With that, the ratio is 3 to 2, and the corruption has better items, giving another point for corruption. The last thing for pre-hard mode is the bosses. First, for the corruption, the boss is the giant worm-like creature known as the Eater of Worlds. Pretty basic and not very difficult unless you're in Master or Expert mode, because it spits poison at you. The Crimson boss, the Brain of Cthulhu, is much more unique. It is a large floating brain with an army of eyewall minions that have to be killed before the brain is vulnerable. It then creates fake clones of itself and teleports. It can be very difficult, especially in Expert or Master mode. The point definitely goes to the Crimson here. Next, the bosses drop items to make an armor set related to the biome. Objectively, the stats are the same. The difference comes with the effects of the armor. The Shadow Armor increases attack speed and movement speed, and the Crimson Armor increases attack and heals you faster over time. They are both almost exactly the same, but the healing benefit of the Crimson Armor is superior. In Expert mode or higher, these two bosses drop a unique item. The Brain drops the Brain of Confusion, which occasionally allows you to dodge attacks and confuses enemies who will no longer target you. It sounds good, but on the other hand, the Worm Scarf, the corruption item, reduces damage by 17%, which is too much to pass up on. So they each get a point, as I prefer one item in both cases. Having killed the Wall of Flesh, the Corruption and Crimson gain new enemies, a new material, and a biome chest. The Corruption features upgraded versions of its pre-hard mode enemies and corrupt slimes. You can also find several enemies in a corrupted underground desert. The most important enemy is the Clinger, which segues into the new material, Cursed Flames, as that's what the Clinger drops. Cursed Flames can be used to craft the Cursed Flames, a spell tome, which, like other Cursed Flame items, lights its target on fire that cannot be extinguished by water. Now the Crimson has very similar things, even Crimson variants of some desert enemies, and a new slime as well. Its material is Ichor, dropped by Floaty Grosses, which is used to craft the Golden Shower tome. Any enemy in both biomes has a slim chance of dropping a unique key for that biome, granting an item related to that biome when the proper chest is unlocked. The corruption item is the Scourge of the Corruptor, which fires a cluster of small Eater of Souls at the enemy. It's decent, but the Crimson variant, the Vampire Knives, is far superior, as they both attack and steal health from the opponent, hence Vampire. Because the hard mode Corruption and Crimson are so similar, the only two real categories to compare them on are the Spell Tome and the Biome Chest. The Crimson wins in both of these, actually, as the Golden Shower halves an enemy's defense when they're sprayed with it, I think, something like that. And I've already explained why the Vampire Knives are so good. With that, I've covered almost everything, and it's time to declare a winner. Our final score was Corruption 4 and Crimson 5, which actually differs from my real opinion, even though this is all my opinion. Because in the end, it all comes down to general preference. So the Crimson is the official winner, based on actual content, but I just prefer the Corruption. Well, that's all the details. They're very well balanced in all those details in various ways. And whichever one you choose is really the best answer. But this dumb point system has determined that it's Crimson. Yeah. Thanks. Bye.